Oh my god. Oh, that's good. That's really good. Hey, what's up? I'm Allie and welcome back to my channel. I am doing my July wrap-up, and as my stats last year kind of projected, July tends to be my best reading month, and this was no exception, which is really weird because I just made a video not that long ago about how I really wasn't feeling reading and stuff in this environment, and I just, like, I don't know, out of nowhere, I was just like reading all kinds of stuff. As always, I'm gonna have timestamps listed down below for the titles in case there is a review that you would like to see specifically, and you can go ahead and see all the titles of that I'm going to talk about if you like spoilers. Is it really a spoiler? Does anyone really care? Probably not. First, I read The Chaos Curse. This is the third in the Kirimanala and the Kingdom Beyond series. This is a middle grade series, and it is based around Indian mythology. It is so much fun. No one ever talks about this series, and it's so good. This one in particular, I really enjoyed this one. Basically, like this mixture of stories that they are falling into, and the stories are kind of getting mixed up, and it's not just like your basic fairy tale type stories. There's some more like well-known stories to kind of children today. There was like a Winnie the Pooh reference and stuff. It's really interesting because there is this mixture of these stories as well. There's also a non-binary tiger in this, and the way that it just explained it, because this is supposed to be to a kid audience, was just so matter-of-factly, and I loved it. It was so good. Kind of how they have to figure out how to get the stories in the right places, stop experiencing these weird other stories, and also they had to keep themselves from being erased from history and stuff. It was just so much fun. I love this series. The premise of this is basically that it is this girl who thinks that she's quite ordinary, and her family always calls her a princess, and then one day she finds out that she is actually a princess from another dimension, and she goes to this dimension and basically has to, demons have taken her parents, and she has to go and fight for their lives, basically. But they get into so many shenanigans. It's about like friendship and family and found family and so many other aspects. If you like Rick Riordan, you're gonna love these. Very reminiscent of that writing style, a mixture of seriousness with that kind of history based with humor, and it's so good. I give this a 4.5. I mostly end up using this as like my TBR in things that I've read, even though I have a TBR cart. So then I ended up reading Beach Read. I love romance in the summer, and I've heard so many good things about this, and I kind of started it and I was like, oh, you know, I'm just looking for something kind of chill to get into, and then I sat down and read it in one sitting. This is so good. I think this is the first time, like, I've been highly attracted to the love interest. Like, I know we tend to get, like, those super muscular, bantery kind of boys, but, like, this nerdy boy had my heart. It was doing so much for me. A literary boy at that, oh my god, I was just like melting. This follows Augustus in January. Augustus has written like a best-selling literary fiction novel, and then January has written several women's literature kind of novels. Writer of some best-selling romance novels. They have a history, and they are enemies. Their father passes away, and she finds out that he had this whole other life, and she ends up inheriting the house of his other life. And so she goes to this house, she's going to clean it up, she's going to move out of it, but during the meantime she has to write a book while she's there, and she's kind of in a rut. Well, she moves in, and no other than Augustus is her neighbor. So they end up coming up with this pact that they are going to swap genres. She will write literary fiction, and he will write romance, and see how that is going to go. And of course, they have to hang out and figure things out, and things happen, and there's chemistry, and I loves it. It was so good, so much fun. I am giving this 5 stars. It was just a really fast read. I loved some of the lines in it that kind of dealt with this women's literature versus literary fiction and what really is the difference and what really isn't. And so just some really great lines about kind of the industry, the publishing industry. So there was some things like that. It was just so good. It deals with a few darker topics as well, such as death and, you know, trust issues and things like that. So it deals a little bit with cults. Like, little out there. But yeah, it was so good. There were so many great releases that had come out within June, the end of June, and so many of my most anticipated releases. Megan Miranda is one of my favorite thriller kind of mystery novel writers, and The Girl from Widow Hills had come out. This, I've been noticing a trend in that I love books recently that are like these mysteries where the main character, their parent has written a book and has become famous for a book, but they want nothing to do with the said fame of their parent and said book. It's a new thing that I'm really loving. I'm trying to find more, and then I want to do like a recommendations video. Anyway, this is one where, as a young girl, Arden had some sleepwalking issues, and she ends up sleepwalking out into a storm, and she's lost for 3 days, and the whole town is looking for her, and they end up finding her 3 days later. Her mother ends up writing a book about this experience and how, like, her daughter had survived and blah, blah, blah. Well, Arden decides she wants to leave that behind. She wants nothing to do with the money, the fame, or any of that. But so she leaves that behind. She changes her name. She moves away and starts a whole new life. And all is good and fine until she starts sleepwalking again. And then she wakes up one night and finds that there is a dead man from her past laying at her feet, and now she knows that her past is coming back for her, and things are going to go haywire because it's like the 20th anniversary of the event, and it's just so many other things. So who done killed this man? Was it her? We don't know. She can't remember. She can't remember a darn thing. But also there's some mystery surrounding the things that happened to her as a child as well, and there's a lot of sketchy characters. Megan Miranda is really good at kind of planting these like red herring characters, and I really enjoy that. This, however, is probably my least favorite Megan Miranda to date. I was already let down from the beginning when I saw this cover. This isn't a traditional Megan Miranda cover to me, and it just, I don't know, didn't seem her style. And then we got into the story. I will say Megan Miranda writes really great female protagonists, and I always really genuinely love that. They're kind of flawed and you suspect them most of the time, so the overall storyline just felt very lacking. It wasn't very thrilling. The mystery was kind of a little all over the place. I felt like everyone was a suspect, which normally is fine, but it was just like, I don't really understand how a lot of these things are coming into play. Like, there was so many things that were added to it that just didn't really make for a good recipe for a story. Like, they could have been really great things in other stories, but in this story it just felt like a really weird mix. What am I doing with this book? I'm like throwing it over my shoulder. What in the world? So I just, was it entertaining enough to read? Yes. Did the end of it kind of take me by surprise? Yes. Kind of made it worth it? Sure. But overall, I just felt like this was a pretty mediocre story coming from Megan Miranda, so I was just really let down by this. I don't know, like, it just wasn't really what I wanted. I don't think that the, like, author thing played into it as much as I was hoping that it would. I think if you're gonna have a parent, and this is just from me because of my recent new favorite thing, if you're gonna talk about how a parent has written a book, I want little lines from that book, and we don't get that in this, so it kind of just felt like a weird thing to add to it. It just felt like trying to take a lot of popular things that are happening in the mystery thriller genre and trying to throw them all in one and mix it together, and it just didn't work as well. I gave this, what did I give this? I gave this a 3.5. It wasn't a bad book. It just, compared to her other things, it wasn't great. And it's a very forgettable book, honestly. Book. I don't know why I did that. Next thing I ended up reading was The Fire This Time, and this is a collection of stories, essays. Why can't I just hold a freaking book today? Oh my god. Anyway, this is an anthology. It is a collection of stories, essays type thing. It is basically about this generation speaking about race and the experiences that they have encountered. I like that it does go through, it's kind of set up into sections. So we have legacy, which kind of talks about more about like the history and the lack of history and history erasure and things like that. And then we got into Reckoning, which is kind of about the things happening today and some of those aspects. A Jubilee section, which is kind of just talking about future generations to come and the changes that need to be made and things like that. So it was such a good read, and it was so interesting to see all these different voices come together. I really enjoyed it. I don't think there was a story that I didn't really like. There was one in particular that just really rang true. White Rage was in here, and that just very relevant to the things going on right now in the world. So it's just a really quick and important kind of collection, but I feel like I can't talk about this book in a way that gives it enough justice for what it does, but I ended up being really immersed in it. I thought provoking and just a really well done collection overall. 5 stars. It is probably one of the best anthologies that I have read personally, and I read the Black Flamingo. Everyone has been talking about this. I do believe that this is set up in prose. I ended up listening to it on audiobook, and the audiobook didn't sound like prose to me, but I don't know. Like, it just literally sounded like someone was sitting down and talking to me. There were some poems mixed in and whatnot, so it was a really quick listen, a really great listen. I love the narration of it. This is about a boy. I don't really feel like it's about him coming to terms with his identity. He's pretty well known, I feel like, with his identity. It does kind of talk about how he is figuring out more as he learns more information, but it deals definitely with the people more around him and the way that they kind of interact with his identity and what it's like to deal with homophobia when it's so close to you, when it's your family or your friends and things like that. And it goes through, like, basically as a kid all the way until college and the experiences and finding community and finding friends and things like that. And it was just a really great story. It was really well written. I don't tend to enjoy prose type books. I say that, but I feel like I've enjoyed every prose book that I've ever read. It talks about, like, the drag community and how he finds a home in the drag community and things like that. And it was just really well done. It was really well written. It was entertaining. I loved just like the little snippets of life and just talking about things like that and just friendship and talking about like the things at school. Like, it was just so realistic. I just loved how raw it felt and how well it transitioned through different periods of life, and I just really ended up enjoying it. I don't really have anything bad to say. I give it a 4.5. I think because of the format, it doesn't go into as much detail, I guess, as I tend to like from books, but again, that's just a personal preference. Nothing necessarily wrong with the book. 4.5 for more of my enjoyment level at the end there, but overall just really well done and really top-notch read. Then another highly anticipated, this is probably my most anticipated read of the year because Riley Sager is my all-time favorite mystery thriller reader. So I was super excited about Home Before Dark. So excited. This also has that new thing that I love in that the protagonist's father has written a very popular book. I love it. I love this one too because it does have snippets of that book in here. Like, every other chapter is like his narration from that book. Basically, this is about this family that had moved into this house. It was really cheap on the market. They were going to redo it and live in it, but they barely even made it a month in there, and they end up fleeing in the middle of the night and never returning. It's years later. Her father has written this book, and he has passed away, and she inherits the house, which she didn't realize they still owned, which she thinks is very odd. So she goes back, she's like, I hate this house, I hate what it's done with my life, I hate that people think they know who I am. Like, there's this like cult following behind her father's book. So she's gonna go back, she's gonna renovate the house, make it basic as can be, and then she's selling it and getting the heck out of there. However, once she moves in, things start happening, and she starts to experience some of the things that were happening within this book. It's weird because she can't remember anything that happened while they lived in this house. So Memories start coming back to her, some mysteries are revealed, some other things are revealed, and she finally finds out why they truly fled in the middle of the night, but that's if she can survive until then. I really like the format of this. I love that it does her perspective and then from the book's perspective. I really like that. Riley Sager has a very addictive writing style, and I think this story too, I just like this haunted kind of feel of it was just so good. And I loved the atmosphere of this book. I loved the pacing of this book. That being said, this was a good book. It's not my favorite Riley Sager. The past two books by Riley Sager have really let me down. The last one, Lock Every Door, was probably my least favorite, and then this one probably comes next. It wasn't that it was a bad story. Again, I love the atmosphere. I love the pacing of it. I like the overall story. The end of it I thought was pretty interesting because it was something that I didn't see coming, but I wish this would have taken the original storyline and went with it. It throws some things in there at the end that I just didn't, like, it brought down my enjoyment. The things that were happening for shock value ended up taking down my enjoyment more than the original kind of plot that was happening. And I think at the end, I felt like we just didn't have enough of the puzzle pieces to really connect everything. And I don't know, it just felt slightly lackluster to me, and I can't really pinpoint what exactly it is. I think another thing with my personal disappointment with it is that I was taking some of the things for truth, and even though I've been told time and time again throughout this that I can't take anyone's word for anything, I was taking things for truth, and then it ended up confusing me in the long run. So then at the end I was like, well, but, and then, so it was kind of hard to decipher what exactly was truth and what was lies to me. That was just my own personal problem with it. I still gave this 4.5. Still a very entertaining and enjoyable read. It was really quick paced. I flew through it. Still entertaining. It's just there was something about it that was just slightly lackluster to me. Then we get into some of my reading rush reads. The first thing that I ended up reading was The Name of the Star, and this is, okay, for some reason, I went back and read the synopsis, and for some reason I just ignored the synopsis and just had like a full-blown different idea of what this book was that was absolutely not it at all. I thought this took place in like 1800s London and was about a girl who could see Jack Ripper and no one else could. I also assumed that there was going to be a romance between Jack the Ripper and her. I don't know where I got these ideas. I have no clue because that's not it at all. This takes place in modern day. A girl moves to England for school, some sort of school. She's going to boarding school. Someone who is mimicking Jack the Ripper's murders, and he's basically doing it in the same way, same fashion, kind of the same dates, just in modern day's time, and of course chaos is kind of erupting around her. She ends up witnessing who she believes might be a suspect in this, and when she's questioned about it, no one else seems to know who the heck she is talking about. So this is her kind of trying to figure out what has happened, who has done this, because she can see them, but no one else can, so kind of getting to the bottom of that. There is no romance between her and the supposed Jack the Ripper wannabe. I don't know why I assume that either. And actually there is a romance, but it is a very small part of this, and it just felt so normal because it was such a high school kind of fling, and I love that. I love that that was realistic. As you can tell, this is a supernatural book, which again, I wasn't really expecting. I think this cover is the thing that is misleading me. But you have to get down to the bottom of this. There is a group of people that she ends up finding. I was really surprised by the amount of humor in this. I don't know why. I was just expecting this to be much more serious, but she's goofing off with her friends. She's goofing off with the people that she meets. I just really loved that. It just felt so real. And so, like, there was just this nice mixture of, like, this teenager, basically, going through life, her normal life, while dealing with this other stuff on top. So it just felt so real, because I feel like so many times they just, like, drop everything and only deal with this thing that's going on. So I really like that mixture. I thought the pacing was really great. I overall enjoyed the storyline. I don't really have much to say outside of that. It was oh my god. It was an entertaining read. It kept me hooked. I kind of knew what was going to happen, but that didn't really change like my excitement for moving forward with the story. I was just interested to see where it was going to go and how it was going to come to an end and the conclusion of it, and just really enjoyed it. It does set it up for the next book. However, I don't think I'm going to be continuing just because I felt pretty satisfied with this, and also because she has discontinued writing this series. She wrote 3 in it and then has stopped writing from then, and I don't know if she's ever going to return to this, so I'm hesitant to start a series that might not have an end. I feel quite good about this. I enjoyed this a lot more than I really thought I was going to, and I gave it 4 stars. Then I had read Raven the Pirate Princess, Volume 7. Raven the Pirate Princess I used to rave about on this channel. It is a graphic novel series. It is about an all-female pirate crew. Raven, the Pirate Princess, her brothers have kind of stolen her legacy, and so she gets an all-female crew in order to go win back her legacy. I very much had my ups and downs with this series, and this one in particular doesn't have like really any action in it. It is solely based on the romantic relationships happening on the ship, which they're all female-female relationships. They're mostly biracial relationships. So I enjoy that these relationships are happening, but I didn't need a whole volume based around these things because it was just them going on dates, and while that's great, I'm expecting an action-packed fantasy kind of graphic novel, and this was just them kind of getting together, and it was nice because you do get to see more personality between these characters. I have complained in the past that it's kind of hard to differentiate between some of these characters, so we do get a little more into each of their lives, but it just wasn't really what I wanted from this. It deals with like body issues and body shaming and depression and things like that, and just dealing with anxiety. So I like that the series deals with that, but sometimes it feels like that's all it can focus on, and it doesn't do a good job of kind of doing the story plot with these issues and mixing those together. It can only like focus on one thing at a time. This wasn't my favorite volume. I'm giving it 3 stars. It was okay. It's enjoyable for what it is, but it just wasn't what I was expecting from the overall series. Next, we have the last thing that I ended up reading for the BookTubeathon. The book, that's not its name. The Reading Rush, and that was Fight Club. Chuck Palahniuk has written one of my all-time favorite books, but Fight Club is obviously his most well-known work. This follows kind of an average guy, and he does his basic job and comes home to his basic apartment, and then one day he finds out that his apartment has exploded, and so he ends up meeting Tyler Durden, and Tyler Durden they start a fight club together, and Fight Club becomes so much more. There are so many different things happening in this story, and Fight Club isn't really the main focus until way later in the story. It's much more on the struggles of like this guy adjusting to a different life with Tyler. There's a lot of things going on. There's also a romance in this, which is interesting too. I feel like you can never talk too much about these because it's quite spoilery. Satire against authority. It's satire against masculinity. It's satire against there's so many layers of society that we could get into with this. I will say that I know there has been conversations around this book. It does specifically talk about DID, which is dissociative identity disorder. Obviously, I, as someone who does not have DID, have no idea how the rep is, but there has been conversations around this about how this is poor DID representation because it is obviously not really correct, and it's very harmful to those who have DID. So I was aware of that going into this. I was very cautious of the things that were happening that were associated with DID. So I did know that going into that. I think this would have been a better book, honestly, if it never even mentioned that, and it ended up just being a more complex part of the story that didn't try to kind of use that as a plot device. Yeah. Again, is this wild and weird and what the fuck? Yes. Is that do I know that going into any Chuck Palahniuk book? Yes. Is this good writing? I think so. I love Chuck's writing. I love the different layers of it. I mean, you could really get into this. I am giving this a 4. I do think that the things that it was saying, especially about like the satire about authority and stuff within the government and things like that, I thought all of that, I think it's very reminiscent of like Eat the Rich, and definitely the gap between classes, and I thought there was a lot of really great commentary that is very relevant to today. Is it mixed with some not so great commentary? Yes, I think part of that is the point. Chuck is always constantly trying to mix in the bad with the good, sometimes more bad than good. Did I understand the point of the actual Fight Club? Not really. Not really at all, but the rest of the story I kind of got. You need like a whole thing to dissect that book, and no. There's probably 10 million articles and discussions and blogs and stuff dedicated to dissecting that. Next we have the escape room. I was really excited about this, okay? I started this and I was hooked because as soon as you start this book, it's opening up to a scene where there's just blood everywhere. You don't know whose blood, you don't know what has happened, there have been gunshots, and then the elevator opens and it's blood. This takes place in a more corporate world. It talks about the world of financing and how cutthroat people are in the financing world and things like that. Basically, people who work in the same office in financing are told that they are going to be doing an escape room because they're very dedicated to their jobs. They've been very successful, they make a lot of money, and they're known for it. So they get put into an elevator and they're told that they are going to be given clues. Your goal is simple: get out alive. So, you know already upon the opening, there's blood everywhere, so someone has not survived. You already know this going into this. What I wasn't expecting is that this is actually multiple perspective. It goes from watching down like on the elevator as things are happening, but it also follows a protagonist from the past, which you find out very quickly in the elevator. The first clue is about someone being dead, and they're like, oh, Sarah is dead. So the other point of view is actually from Sarah. And Sarah has been taken into this world. She starts working here. They have already been working there, but Sarah is the new person, and it's kind of her look on the things that happened within this office and the world of financing and just how treacherous people are in this world. And you find out, of course, from her point of view, you have to find out, one, why these people are in this elevator and the things that are happening to them. And then you're also finding out what happened to Sarah and what has happened in this office and the different things that have happened to them. So it was pretty interesting. It was pretty fast-paced. I love these like complex relationships between people. I love finding out who's connected to who and what has happened between people. I love finding out like old dug-up histories of people. The one thing is that I personally am not big on like financial thrillers. I tend to feel like they all kind of end the same, and I really didn't think that this was any exception. I was also expecting a lot more from the actual escape room. When you tell me it's an escape room, I'm picturing like a full-blown, like there's clues involved and things like that. And my biggest complaint with this is that the clues that are given to them, you don't have any history when the clues are given until after the clue is given. So I really don't like that because I love when a clue is given and I can solve it. But you are given nothing to go along with these clues. You don't figure them out till like later, and you're kind of given the clue and then given the context of it, and most of the time the clues just weren't that great, and there really wasn't much going on for this escape room. It wasn't really an escape room. I feel like this is kind of misleading. I don't know, like I enjoyed the complicated things that were happening. I just felt really let down by I feel like I was promised a game and I didn't get any game aspect of this, and that was kind of upsetting. I didn't care for like the clues of it. The writing was great. I don't want to dismiss that. I felt like the writing was good. I thought it was paced really well. I think that the overall story was well done, but again, I just felt disappointed because I didn't get that game aspect, and I felt like this ended kind of how I expected it to end, and I don't know, it just ended up being kind of a letdown for me. I was expecting just such a different kind of story, and again, the financing world thing just isn't my thing. I am giving this a 3.5. It had a good mixture of things that I feel like I liked, but also things that I disliked, and overall I do feel like the writing was good and things like that, but just it wasn't what I was expecting. The very last book is the Subtweet, and this is one of the most stunning covers I've ever seen. I love this cover so much. But this is a story about a budding friendship, and then the falling out of that friendship, and how social media kind of constructed the whole thing. It follows two artists, one of which is an original singer, and then the other one who is a cover singer, and how their friendship comes about, what happens in between, and how one gets success and the other one doesn't, and how that kind of creates a bitterness, how a subtweet ruins it all. To say that that is all this is about would be an extreme disservice to this book. This book is a satire. It is about the music industry. It is about brown people are treated differently within the music industry and really any industry, and by people. It is about the power of social media and just the different levels of social media. Relationships work, especially within like a music industry. It's just, there's so many layers to this book, and you could, I really want a copy of it because honestly I would love to dissect all the different topics that this even has in it in such a short book, and to be done in such a beautiful way. It's such in a way that the story feels complex, but the writing isn't necessarily complex. It's beautiful writing. I love this writing. Book clubs need to pick this book up because there are endless things to discuss within this book. I mean, especially just the thing with social media and how subtweet culture is, and just things like that, and Instagram culture, and how likes work, and how that affects friendships, and just the power of influencers, and things like that. Like, there were so many layers to this that I feel like I need a whole discussion video on all the different things that this book deals with. I'm surprised that I haven't seen anyone else talking about this book. Maybe I haven't been looking at any of the right places, but I just thought that this was such a powerful book. I haven't stopped thinking about it. I originally gave it a 4-star just because I went into it expecting something a little bit different. I felt like we didn't fully get into the characters as much as I would have liked to. This first read was just like a glimpse. I felt like I just did not fully understand all the different layers of things that this book was trying to convey. And I've done this in the past where I've read books and I haven't enjoyed them, only to realize later that I just had skimmed like the surface level without fully understanding the depth of a story. And this is, I feel like, one of them. Even though I enjoyed the overall story, I think that I have just skimmed the top of it. Like, there's so many things to get into and discuss with this book. So many things! Like, people, I need you to read this book and then just sit on it. Sit and think on it. Because, like, the past week, I haven't been able to start really anything complicated since I read this, because it's like I'm still thinking about all the layers of this book. I just think this is a really relevant satire to today, and I think especially like this community, I feel like could definitely participate in this discussions being had, because it is about social media. And hello, that's where I'm at. That is all of those books. Holy hell. I feel like I've been talking for years. Let me know some of the things that you guys read in July. Have we read any of the same things? Have you read any of these books? Let me know. I hope you guys have liked this video. Don't forget to subscribe to see future videos from me. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next one. Bye!